Felix? Get your smelly little ass out here. This boat is lifting off in 5, even if they have to grind you up in the gears. Felix squeaked in surprise as his supervisor, human Clara Bones, shouted at him. He scrambled to unwedge himself from the guts of the ship's engine. He stood at his full height, barely meeting her waist, and saluted. "Sorry, boss. All done, boss." "What you want? A cookie? Get back to the pits." Felix scooped up his tool pack and bounded down the maintenance ramp towards the assembly area the maintenance crews called the pits, where a bunch of other humans waited, grumbling. "Been waiting on you, tank rat," said human Big Carl. "What happened? You find some garbage to munch on in there and lose track of time?" The other humans laughed. Jokes at Felix's expense were nothing new. His people, the Screet, were considered the dregs of the galaxy, barely higher than vermin. He was lucky Clara had taken a chance on him and given him this job. "That engine had a bad energy coil." He held up a cracked metal part. "I could smell it in there. If they tried to enter a hyperlane, it could have blown out the whole drive. They'd have been lucky to just be stranded without power." The humans all looked at each other. "You smelled a cracked coil?" said human Lance. "I smelled the gas leaking." "Lord, I'm surprised he can smell anything over his own stick," said human Deshawn. Felix's whiskers twitched with embarrassment as the humans all laughed again. "That's enough of that," said Clara, as she grabbed the cracked coil from Felix. "End of shift. Everybody hit the showers. You all smell like shit." Later that night. "New guy buys the first round," said Big Carl. Felix sighed and hopped down from his chair to hit the bar. He scrambled up onto the tall stool so he could look at the bartender, a fat Prentak in the compound eyes. "Hey, my table needs a round of drinks." The bartender didn't move. "Hey, I said we need drinks. You have 240-degree vision. I know you can see me." Still, the bartender did nothing. Felix ground his teeth. He was accustomed to prejudice after all these years, but it still hurt. "Hey, what's the hold-up?" said Clara from behind him. "When we said get us around, we didn't mean go back to your home world for them." "I tried, but..." Felix began to point to the bartender, when a gang of tall Frenzians walked up to the bar. One of them, with a scarred eye, shoved Felix right off his stool. "Move it, Screet," he said, as he sat down where Felix had just been standing. "Hey," said Clara, slapping the Frenzian on the shoulder. "He was just talking to me." Scarface turned and looked her up and down. He grinned. "You talk to Screet? On purpose? Bad habit, human," he said with a laugh that was joined by his comrades. He turned back and signaled the bartender, who suddenly had no trouble seeing new customers. "Hey," Clara said again, this time shoving him slightly. "I said he was just talking to me, and he was sitting there. Find a new seat." Scarface turned on his stool to face her fully. "You cannot be serious. It's a Screet. They're pests. They shouldn't even be allowed on the colony." "He's part of my crew. Get up and find a new seat. Now."
"Or what?"
She leaned into his face. "Or you and me have a problem." The scarred Frenzian stood up. So did the others. Each was a head or more taller than Clara. "Boss, no," said Felix. "I can get another seat." Clara ignored him and locked eyes with Scarface. He grinned again, baring his long and crooked teeth.
"Suppose I don't move. What are you going to do about it, human?"
Felix was about to turn and run when the loud scraping of chairs caught his attention. All of the other human mechanics had jumped to their feet and were forming up behind Clara. Scarface's grin disappeared. Frenzians, another Deathworld race, were one of the few species that could physically compete with humans. But taking on a whole pack of humans was another matter. Silence fell over the whole bar. "Now," said Clara, in a deadly whisper, "I'm going to tell you once more, and once more only. Get another seat." She punctuated each word with a hard poke into Scarface's broad chest. He looked at her, then at Felix, then at the other humans standing behind them. He rattled his quills angrily as he sneered at Clara, but she stood her ground. Big Carl cracked his knuckles loudly. Humans, Lance and Deshawn both folded their thick arms across their chests. Felix felt the eyes of all the patrons on them. They all dreaded what would happen if a bunch of Deathworlders got in a fight. The Frenzian with the scarred eye hissed and stepped back. He jerked his head at the other Frenzians, and they all walked out. "Hey!" Big Carl shouted, slapping the counter and making everyone else jump. He pointed at the bartender. "Serve my friend." The Prentak nodded quickly. It was tricky for Felix to carry 5 cold bottles from the bar to the table, but he managed it. He noticed all the tables near theirs had suddenly become empty. As he climbed back into his chair, Felix looked around at his human co-workers. "Why did you do that?" "Do what?" asked Clara. "Stand up to them. Defend me." The humans looked at each other, then back at him. "Because you're part of the crew," said human Lance, like it was the most obvious thing in the universe. Deshawn and Carl clinked their bottles against his. "Yeah, but," said Felix hesitantly, "you guys say stuff just like that to me all the time. Tank rat, stink bomb, rat fucker, and a bunch of other stuff." Clara rolled her eyes. "That's different." "Why is it different?" "Because you're part of the crew. You might be a mangy little tank rat, but you're our mangy little tank rat," said Carl. "And we'll break the legs of anyone else who calls you that," said Deshawn. Clara snorted. "The only legs you've ever broken are your own, numbnuts." The whole table laughed and clinked bottles again. Hours later. The humans laughed somewhat drunkenly as they stumbled out of the bar. As they rounded the corner into the alley, their old pal Scarface stepped out of the shadows. "Humans," he sneered. "Think you're so tough? We'll see how tough you are." His gang of Frenzians stepped up behind him, brandishing weapons. "So that's how it is," said Clara, pulling a wrench from her belt. "Well, come on then, you porcupine pussy. Let's go." As Felix ducked behind a dumpster, several things happened at once. Deshawn baseball pitched his mostly empty beer bottle straight into the face of the biggest Frenzian. It shattered on his forehead, stunning him long enough for Deshawn and Lance to tackle him to the ground and start raining down blows. Big Carl grabbed an old rusty rebar from a dumpster and charged the 2 Frenzians who were armed with lengths of chain. He swung hard, forcing them back. He swung again and caught one in the knee. There was a loud crack and the Frenzian screamed. The other one whipped Carl across the back with his chain. Carl roared and swung around again. Clara squared off with Scarface. She darted in, feinting one way then the other, then made a daring knee slide between his legs. She smacked her wrench against the nerve cluster on the inside of his thigh as she slid through, causing him to roar with pain. But her daring move cost her. Scarface whipped around and caught her by the hair, pulling her back and pinning her to the ground. He wrapped his other hand around her throat. She clawed at his arm as he began to throttle her. Felix saw Clara was in trouble, and something came over him. He streaked out of his hiding place, faster than he'd ever moved before, and bit down as hard as he could against Scarface's lower leg. His people might not be strong or brave, but their teeth were sharp. The Frenzian screamed and let go of Clara's neck as she tried to shake Felix off, but Felix clung on tenaciously. In the chaos, Clara jumped on his back. She shouted, "Have a matching set, motherfucker!" and raked her nails across the Frenzian's good eye. He screamed and began to thrash blindly. Clara and Felix both rolled off him as he buckled and flailed about. Clara snatched up her wrench and cracked him across the back of the skull, putting him down for the count. As the excitement wore off, Felix and Clara stared at each other, panting. A silent understanding seemed to pass between them. Felix looked around at the others. The humans were bruised and bloody, and Lance looked like he might have a broken nose, but they were better off than the Frenzians. Most of them were unconscious, except the one whose leg had been shattered by Big Carl.
"Little bastard damn near ripped my beard off," said Carl.
"That's why I keep telling you to shave that stupid thing off," said Clara, rubbing her neck. "You look like a hobo."
"And disrespect my proud Viking heritage?" said Carl with mock outrage. "Not a chance. Somebody has to show you pansies what a real man looks like."
In a flash of inspiration, Felix blurted out, "That's not what your mum said last night." There was a moment of tense silence. Then the humans burst out laughing.
"Come here, you little shit rag," said Carl,
as he playfully grabbed at Felix. He dodged out of the way, and the other humans laughed as Carl chased him down the alley, leaving the moaning and bleeding Frenzians behind.